Members of our Inspired Conference audience, welcome to the penultimate session here on day 3, The Future of Money. We will be joined by Ms. Batya Shulman. She'll be covering the topic of FIRE, F-I-R-E, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. The age-old question being, is this a pipe dream? Is this something that only Hollywood actors and Premier League footballers can afford to do with their lives? Batya was formerly the CFO of Australia's largest bank, and today she is a partner with St. James's Place Wealth Management Asia in Singapore. Being a mother to 3 children, Batya is very much aware that we live busy lives, and many of us find it difficult to find the time and the energy to manage our finances. She therefore brings with her wealth of experience some handy tips that all of us can put into immediate practice in order to live the retirement that we aim for. Welcome to our next session at the Inspired Conference, Day 3, The Future of Money. We are here with Ms. Batya Shulman. Batya used to be in a senior management role with, I believe, the largest bank in Australia. And now she is with St. James's Place Wealth Management, the Asia branch in Singapore. And Batya, your organization did some research, a study, and this actually happened before the whole COVID situation began. And this study was conducted with over 2,000 respondents from the countries of Singapore and Hong Kong, looking into participants who have net monthly income, household income of, I think it's over 3,000 US dollars after converting from Hong Kong and Singapore dollars. And the results were starking. I mean, we had over half of the respondents being fearful that they didn't have enough savings for retirement. We had over half of the respondents saying that they would probably need assistance from family, close relatives, and friends in terms of their retirement. And we had, I think it was around 70% of participants who claimed that they felt a significant source of stress from planning for their retirement. And all this ties in very well with the topic of Batya's session. So the acronym is FIRE, F-I-R-E, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And the question is this a pipe dream? So welcome, Batya.
Thank you, Nigel. It's a pleasure to be here today.
All right, so let's jump straight into the first question. And as the title of your session suggests, is it a pipe dream to have this idea of wanting to be financially independent and retire early? Or I guess maybe not retire early, but retiring at an age of one's choice. Is this a luxury that is only afforded to people like rock stars or athletes in professional sports, or those who happen to find themselves in senior management in large MNCs? Or is this an ambition that realistically each and every one of us can achieve?
Thank you, Nigel. Well, actually, it depends. Okay, and why I say it depends. So if you are 60 years old, you come and ask me, I would like to retire tomorrow. And we look at what your savings are, and we look what assets you have. And if you don't have much, well, 1 year is not sufficient time to save. But if you come to me and you say, I'm age 30, I want to retire in about 30, 35 years, I want to start putting some money away. And it doesn't have to be hundreds and thousands. It could be just a small amount. It could be $1,000 a month. Do you know that if you put $1,000 away a month, over 30 years, that would increase to, on average, around $1.2 million. So yes, it is possible, but it depends on where you are in your life, when do you want to retire, and there are a few other things to consider. And the answer would vary depending on the person. Where do you want to retire? So if you want to retire in Singapore or Malaysia or Sydney or Bali or Thailand, the cost of living varies quite significantly. Okay, so that would have an impact. What kind of lifestyle do you want to live when you retire? You want to live a simple life by the beach and meditate, and or do you want to fly first class in a fancy jet and drink champagne, and therefore the needs and the amount to save for would vary significantly. But the best advice is there's no better time than the present. Okay, it's never too late unless it's tomorrow. But then even then, there's something that you can do. You would obviously take a very different approach if you were retiring in a shorter time frame than if you took a longer time frame. But no, this is very important that people need to live in and think about the future and start planning proactively.
Thank you, Batya. Essentially, if I may summarize, it's the answer to the question is that it's a personal journey with personal choices made based on our personal ambitions. And I'm sure, Batya, you will be guiding our audience members with some very personalized advice as a result. So if we consider what you have just mentioned, let's take a look at the worldview in general. Batya, do you think the world needs a pay rise? Are we all paid sufficiently, remunerated fairly? And also, given the current state of the world, especially post-pandemic as well, we are seeing more and more people moving into the independent workforce space, and more people moving into the gig economy as well. So would people in this realm need a different sort of pathway towards planning for retirement?
Okay, great. I can do two questions there. I'll answer the first question. Does the world need a pay rise? Well, if you look at inflation, the cost of inflation, so I'm based in Singapore, and the cost of inflation is about 3% per annum. So yes, I would need a pay rise at least in line with inflation. Having said that, if you look at the current situation and the pandemic that we faced, inflation growth was kind of stalled for the time being. However, what was very interesting was that the latest consumer price index was released last month, and there had been the biggest increase in the consumer price index in 1 month since 2011. And although while some things say like rent may have gone down, what was interesting, the prices of food went up by around 5.8%. And you know what? It's because people are eating more from home. The people are grocery shopping. So that's quite a high inflation rate. So this is something to be mindful of. Inflation is real. And yes, your pay increase should increase in line with the cost of living. Now, going on to your next question, Nigel, about the gig economy and what should people who rely on, partial flexible income, what should they be doing? These gig workers, it is absolutely imperative that you have very sound financial plans. And the very basics is have an emergency fund. And what is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is if you cannot work, if you cannot do your job, this is the money that you're going to rely on. And as a gig worker, you're very dependent on your salaries. So your emergency fund is the money that you keep in cash. And I know that keeping money in the bank is not necessarily a good idea in the low interest rate environment, but you need liquid assets. Now, a lot of people will ask me, how much do I need as an emergency fund? And it really depends on the individual, because if you've got, no children and no responsibility, you may need less. But as a rule of thumb, it is 4 to 6 months of your monthly expenses. But in today's environment, I'm saying hold a little bit more. Hold more for that peace of mind. So let me give you an example. Say I spend $10,000 a month, okay? My emergency fund would be around 40 to 60,000 plus extra so that I don't have to worry. as a gig economy worker, you would really need to make sure that you have sufficient emergency fund. Another thing is you should make sure that you have a retirement plan. So a lot of people forget about that. You may not be contributing, putting money away every month. It's just so important. Whatever you can afford, whether it's $100 a month or $2 or $3 or $1,000, what is your surplus? What can you afford to put away, not worry about, and let that money grow? Other things to consider as a gig worker is insurance. Okay, so if you work for a company, you would normally get some health insurance benefits. If you work for yourself, do you have sufficient health insurance? We've all heard the saying that there's no wealth without health. Okay, so it's very important to make sure that if you can't work and you're hospitalized, who's going to pay the bills? Do you have sufficient life insurance? Do you need life insurance? Okay, and life insurance is if you have children or people dependent on you. If you're not again working, will your family members be left unsupported? And finally, what I would say for any gig workers is treat it like you're a business owner. And for some people say, of course I'm a business owner, but really understand your expenses, control them, know where you're spending money. Okay, understand your income, understand what the value of your time, how much is your time worth, and control, and have the ability to control that. So yes, being a gig worker, there's a lot of opportunities, but I think you've actually got to work extra hard in making sure that your financial plan is very robust and secure, and that you are looking after yourself and your family for the future.
So there we have it. We have keeping an emergency fund, having some savings for retirement. We also have insurance, which is a topic we will explore in greater detail later on in this interview. And also just, I guess, treating your services as though you run a business. And I think that is something that most gig economy workers neglect in terms of that mindset. So, but yeah, moving on to the following question. We, just as I alluded to the word mindset, do you believe that the younger generations, depending on their upbringing, that they may differ in terms of the ability to pick up certain skills that may help towards financial independence? Or I think the easier way to ask this would be, is it true that those who come from maybe less privileged upbringing are more capable of saving and more capable of making financial decisions that are more sound?
Interesting question. And I think if you look at life in general, how do people learn? People learn from the life lessons. People learn from the hardships. You don't necessarily remember the good times. You always remember how you struggled and the bad times and how you overcame it. So I think that people who come from financially disadvantaged backgrounds, they are forced to have lessons, be taught life lessons, than people who have an abundance of money and whatever they want, they get. However, as parents, and I'm a parent, I've got 3 young kids, I think we as parents have the responsibility to instill the right values within our children and to teach them very, very important lessons. Don't waste. No matter how much money you have, don't waste. Save. Teach them the beauty of compound interest, the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So teach your kids, show them money should be earned. You should earn it. It doesn't just come. You don't just go to the ATM and put a machine in. You have to earn it. Goal setting. It's so important to teach your kids about setting goals. If you want a toy, well, you don't just get it. You work towards it. And something that I've done with my children is I have 3 jars. One's for saving, one's for spending, and one's for sharing. And they learn. So the money that they save, we'll talk about compound interest, and we watch, and let's watch the money grow, and this is for very specific goals. Spending, yeah, if you want McDonald's on the weekend, okay, don't judge me. This will be your treat. And then for sharing, it's very important to be able to give back to society, to give to people who are less privileged. And it's very powerful teaching your children at a very young age the power of sharing. So going back to your question, Nigel, yes, as parents, we have the responsibility to ensure that the right lessons and values are instilled in our children. And what's quite unfortunate is this is not really taught at school. Financial literacy is absent from the school curriculum. And hopefully this is something that will be addressed in the future.
That's so true, but yeah, I was just about to make that same point. The fact that financial literacy is missing from most national curriculums worldwide. And also, I think, given the fact that a lot of parents, I think not just in Asia, but in other parts of the world, spend money on private tuition for, your languages and your sciences and your maths and, arts lessons, music lessons, and so on. We have a lot of providers out there who also offer programs in financial literacy, and that's something to invest in as well. But I think more importantly than that, as you have alluded to, all of this starts at home, much like most other learnings. So it is vital that parents, caregivers are able to impart these skills, I guess, to young children.
Absolutely.
Right. So, Batya, you mentioned earlier that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Perhaps you could elaborate further on that?
Perfect. Okay. Yes. So compound interest, what it is that the money that you are investing, okay, the interest you're earning is being reinvested. So a very example, if I'm putting $1,000 away every month, the interest that I'm earning on that $1,000 is reinvested, and then I'm constantly earning more interest on the principal. So the principal is growing, the base is growing, and you're consistently earning interest, and that money is growing. Now, I'll give you some examples. And I think I mentioned it earlier about if you invest $1,000 a month. So if you say invest $1,000 a month over 10 years, this will grow to about $170,000. If you continue to invest for another 10 years, so you invest $1,000 over 20 years, that's going to grow to $520,000 approximately. And then if I invest for another 10 years, so I'm investing $1,000 over 30 years, that $520,000 over the next 10 years is going to grow to approximately $1.2 million. So this is showing you the beauty of compound interest, and it's the beauty of how you can save for the future and watch your money grow with disciplined savings and the positive impact of compound interest. Your money can grow.
So we've touched on the different aspects, the different demographics of communities, whether they are financially less privileged or more privileged. But when we look further into equity and inclusion, we have the realm of fintech accelerating in its expansion now, and this is affecting populations that may not have access to infrastructure, that may not have the necessary digital literacy to be able to cope. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you think fintech is an enabler, or do you think fintech is a hurdle, or maybe both?
Well, personally, I love technology. I think technology is an enabler, but there are some limitations that you need to be aware of. In terms of fintech, in terms for financial literacy, I think it's actually a great opportunity to reach. There's about 1.7 billion people in the world who don't have access to traditional financial services. And by using fintech, by using mobile banking, most people in third world countries have a mobile phone. And by using financial literacy through fintech, you can reach the underprivileged. So I actually see it as a great enabler. Crowdfunding, micro lending, the world is evolving that traditional banks would not necessarily move in that direction. The costs and fees are significantly lower. However, there are risks involved: cybersecurity, data privacy, fraud, a lot of fraud, and especially for people who aren't educated. You can overpricing. People can take advantage of people. And then for me, you can't really replace the human touch, and fintech is great, improved data analytics, improved reporting, using a logarithm to come up with amazing data. But if you're talking to a robot, are you going to get empathy? Are you going to get understanding? If you lost your job, what's a robot going to tell you? And so for me, there is definitely still the value of face-to-face advice, of being a trusted business partner, of helping people through the challenges in life. So yes, I think there are opportunities, but people just need to be mindful and careful, just like everything in life.
Yes, there certainly needs to be a need for both the artificial and also the organic, the human touch to work hand in hand for the best results. But yeah, you alluded to previously the subject of health insurance and life insurance. And given that many people around the world, perhaps more so in developing countries where having additional income to invest in insurance is a luxury still, what are your thoughts, perhaps advice towards people who are still hesitant to invest in health and life insurance, or perhaps other forms of insurance as well? And how do you think this can be remedied?
There is no wealth without health. For me, I look at investments and insurance very separately. They shouldn't really be combined. Investments for you is you're trying to make your money grow, you're trying to get the best possible return, you're working towards specific goals. But insurance is really about protection, okay? And protecting your health and protecting your loved ones. So let's just talk about health insurance. If you don't have health insurance and you fell sick or you cannot work and you go to hospital, it's no matter which country you're in, it's going to be very expensive. The cost of healthcare is significantly increasing. And even if you go to the public system, there is a cap in how much is subsidized. So everyone should make sure that they have some form of health insurance to protect themselves. It would create a very, very significant financial burden on their lives and their families' lives if they are not covered. So yeah, health insurance is about covering your medical bills if you fell ill. There are other elements of insurance that also should be considered, like life insurance. Again, this is a very specific protection that you are protecting your family, protecting your loved ones. Now, if you came to me and you said to me, Batya, I don't have any children, I don't have any intentions of having children, I don't have any debt, I want life insurance, I'll tell you to go away and stop wasting my time and your money, because what are you protecting? If you're taking out life insurance, if I'm taking out life insurance, I want it to protect my 3 children. To protect, if I'm not around, how are they going to live? So this is either going to replace my income and cover my expenses until my children are independent. Do I need life insurance for the rest of my life? No, I'm going to die one day. So for me, it's really about protecting the needs of my family. There's other kind of insurance, is critical illness insurance. What happened if I was to get cancer and I can't work? And this is very important for going back to gig economy workers. If you're really dependent, if yourself is a commodity, then yes, critical illness is important because it would be subsidizing my income for the times that I cannot work. So protection is important. You have to, however, weigh up the cost and benefits of insurability versus affordability. And what do I mean by that? just say that if I look at my needs, say my children are very young, and life in Singapore is very expensive. And if I look at my needs and I say I need $2 to $3 million to cover my children until they're independent, but the premium for a $3 million insurance may be too expensive. So it doesn't mean that I don't take out anything. I may take out something a little bit less. At least I have some cover, but I'm still mindful of what I can afford. So don't be put off by saying, I can't afford it, so I'm going to have nothing. Really need to understand what your needs are, what you can afford. Understand the product. I cannot emphasize that more importantly. Understand what you're covered for, understand what is excluded. There are also some tips to be mindful when it comes to insurance. Number one, insurance becomes more expensive the older you become. And unfortunately, you only get insurance when you're healthy. So, if you are unhealthy, you may not get insured, or if you are insured, it's only after a certain period of time. The premiums are loaded. So, important things to understand. But just to summarize what I said, always look at a needs basis. And again, your personal objective for your health and your family's well-being.
Definitely. I think the importance of looking into one's needs, and I guess doing the necessary homework, doing the due diligence. We see so many people buying insurance because they want a peace of mind, and I think that's what a lot of us, a trap that we fall into. We want that peace of mind, and then we see an advertisement, or we get approached by a friend or family member who says, oh, I'm selling this insurance, and we buy it immediately without looking into the fine print. And the T's and C's for insurance policies can extend to many pages as well. So I guess that's one other aspect that we have to look into in terms of studying. You mentioned critical illness policies, whereby sometimes after claiming for one of these policies, you can no longer be insured in the future. So there are many of these traps that we have to be aware of.
There are traditional critical illness policies is, if you make a claim, you're no longer insured. And what's coming out in the market is what they call multi-pay products. And what they are is they insure you at multiple stages. So, some of them may have some waiting periods, some of them may cap the payout, but what they ensure is that you have continuous coverage, which is very important. And unfortunately, people, if you're getting cancer, you're having a heart disease, doesn't mean that you're going to not get it again. So really understand that. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Never be pressurized to buy into anything that you don't understand and that you don't need.
That's great advice. And, we've covered in our interviews so far various areas touching on retirement planning, but I guess now it's time to go into the bread and butter of the topic. So with our audience members potentially looking at how they can prepare financially for retirement, and our diverse audience members coming from various age groups, various professional backgrounds, various demographics as well, could you perhaps tailor your advice for, let's say, 3 different groups? So we're looking at people who have perhaps just started their career, just started earning an income. We're also looking at people who are already amidst a stable career, let's say 10, 15 years into a career pathway. And also we're looking at people who are perhaps on the journey already to retirement with whatever age you are in, with less than 5 years to go towards your retirement, your planned retirement date. So Batya, take it away.
Okay, so we have, to summarize, we've got 3 different age groups. But the overall principle that I'm going to walk you through are more the same. But what you would invest in would differ slightly. So let's see what's the first thing. The first thing, no matter with what anyone, is understand your personal financial goals and objectives. If you are investing, why are you investing? Are you investing for your children's education? Are you investing for your retirement? Are you investing to buy a property? Are you investing to start a business? Very important to understand why you're investing. And why? It's because if I'm investing to buy a property and I want to buy a property in 1 year's time, would I invest my deposit? Absolutely not. Too high risk. I would keep that liquid. I would keep that in the bank. Yes, we'll talk about that a little later about why it's not a great idea keeping it in the bank. But yes, that's a short-term goal. I would need to keep that liquid. If I'm saving for my children's education, and that's in 10 years, versus retirement, which may be in 20, 30 years, what I would invest in would also be slightly different. And what I mean, and it's the same goes to the different ages, is the longer that you invest for, the more risk you can take. The shorter your time frame, the more conservative you should be. But it's always, everyone, however, has a different risk profile. And what I mean by that, Nigel, you may be a very conservative investor. And I'll say invest in bonds, or for me, I may be very adventurous. So I may like emerging markets and equities. And so it's very important to understand, one, your financial goals and objectives, your timeline, and your risk profile. Rule number 2 is always have sufficient cash on hand for emergencies. So it's your emergency fund. And we spoke about that. Minimum 4 to 6 months of cash in the bank, plus a little bit more to help you sleep better. And if you're a business owner and you've got children, if it's 2 or 3 months more, whatever it is to make you feel comfortable. But we don't want to hold too much cash. Why? The risk of inflation. Now, do you know, so the inflation rate in Singapore is around 3%. If you had $1 million in the bank and you left it there for 10 years and you did absolutely nothing with it, you know how much that money would be? $743,000. And if you left it there for 20 years, $552,000. So inflation is real. And in today's markets, interest rates are at an all-time low. That it's not going up. We're entering a recession. Interest rates are not going to be going up. Very important to make your money work for you. Next rule number 5, I think we're on. It's about diversifying your investments. Okay, and diversify as widely as you can. And you never put your eggs in one basket. Markets may be going up and they're hopefully going down. But they're not going to be moving in the same direction. So for me, it's so important that you make sure that you're very, very well diversified. So whether you are starting off your investment journey or you are retiring, you would make sure your portfolio is well diversified. But someone in their 30s versus someone in their 60s would have a different kind of portfolio. Someone in their 60s would have more bonds, but would still be well diversified. Someone who's in their 30s will probably, you can take more risk, do more equities, but still have some diversification. A lot of people are asking me about gold, especially in today's recession, risky market. Is gold a safe haven? Is it a hedge? Gold alone is still not safe. Gold as part of a commodity portfolio and part of a very well diversified portfolio, yes, you can consider that. So yes, don't just hold property, don't just hold equity, don't just hold cash. Make sure your portfolio is very, very well diversified. So these are just some very basic rules, understand your goals and objectives. And the last one, invest for the long term. Anything short term is going to be high risk. And, in your retirement age, you need to be very mindful of that. Very, very mindful. If you had invested your retirement funds in January or February this year, and the market dropped in March, you would not be in a very good situation. Investing has risks. You need to be able to balance the risk to get the returns that you want, and understand your objectives, understand why you're investing, and invest to reach your goals. Very basic principles. I call them my 5 rules. And then you would tailor them based on your objectives, your timeline for investing, your risk profile, and what you want to achieve.
Thank you, Batya, for your 5 rules of sound investment, I guess, towards planning for retirement. And as basic as they sound, these guiding principles are fundamental, and these are things which vast majorities of the population are still not practicing, and that is why they are much needed. So I guess moving on from that question, in terms of mistakes that you have seen in your over 2 decades of advising people and advising organizations, even what are the key mistakes that perhaps you could point out a few, and also maybe in terms of moving forward, things that people should already be aware of, but perhaps still the awareness is still lacking.
All right, I'm going to start off and ask you a question, Nigel. I'm going back to you. What do you think is investing? Is investing logical or investing emotional?
I would say it's a 50-50.
50-50. Okay. So the left-hand side of the brain is our logic. The right-hand side is our emotional side. Most investors act emotionally when it comes to investing. And this is the biggest mistake. You should not act emotionally. You should act logically. Now, look at it. The markets are going up. People are excited. They're optimistic. This is great. The minute that the markets start to dip and fall, people get worried. They get anxious. And people start selling. Why would you sell when markets are down? No, this is the time when you should be buying. So when investors are panicking, during the pandemic, and why would you sell? That's the worst possible thing that any investor could do. What you should do is you should go back and say, these are my goals, these are my objectives. I need to ride out the storm. I need to be patient. I need to be logical. Me, I don't even look at my investment. I don't want to look at my investment because I know I'm investing for the long term. So that what investors should be patient. You should not act emotionally. Always think logically. Think about why you were investing and ride it out. Ride out the storm. So that's the first thing that is so common. Another common mistake is putting all your eggs in one basket. Not diversifying. I have many people say, I've got so many assets. I've got 5 houses all in Malaysia. Now, what happens if the property market in Malaysia drops? Okay. What happens if a natural disaster, and that property is wiped out? Properties are not liquid. It's in case of emergency, how quickly can you liquidate your portfolio? So it's very, very important to make sure that your portfolio or your investments are very well diversified across asset classes, across countries, across geographies, across fund managers, as widely as you can diversify. Third mistake, and this is probably going back to my rules, my 5 rules of investing, not holding enough emergency funds, not having people that I've got, and this is a lot with some very wealthy investors. They've got lots and lots of money. They all tied up. Okay, tied up, and there will be very heavy penalties and heavy fees to get out of some investment funds, or you don't necessarily want to sell your apartment when the market's down. So you always have enough emergency funds that you wouldn't have to liquidate your portfolio if markets were down, or you will have to pay penalties. Next mistake is holding too much cash. Okay, underestimating the impact of inflation. I'm just keeping my money under my bed. It's not a great idea in today's market. Trying to time the market. Oh, I get this question asked all the time. I wish I had a crystal ball. Everyone asks me, Batya, when's the best time to invest? I don't know. No one knows. The press certainly does not know. Do not believe anything you read in the media. Okay, they don't get it right. No one knows. But there's a concept that calls time in, not timing. And what you see if you follow look at history and you look at market ups and downs, often the biggest recoveries are after the biggest drops. So when you see the biggest drops in market, you're going to see the biggest recoveries. No one can time that. But what I do know is if you invest today and you kept in a well-diversified portfolio and you kept it there for long term, medium to long term, you'll be better off than keeping your money in cash. So don't try to time the market. Just make sure that you're invested. So that's another thing to think about. Buying because of hype. Okay. Don't listen to what your neighbor's doing or your best friend or your boss. That's not what you should be doing. You buy because of you have portfolios that are aligned with what you want to do. Another one, currency. Okay, a lot of people always say try to pick which currency to invest in. Currency is extremely difficult to predict. Hedging is very expensive, okay, and not advisable for retail investors. And people always ask me, what should I do with currency? Invest in the currency that you hold or the currency that you'll need in the future, but don't try hedge or bet currency movement. Another interesting one is past performance is not necessarily indicative of future performance. So, if you're looking at a fund, wow, I mean, look at last year, 13% return, that's phenomenal. Those fund managers aren't getting the same return this year, I can assure you that. Markets have picked up, but it wasn't the same as last year. So there's a lot more science behind it than just looking at past performance. And the most important thing is just to make sure, another thing is tinkering. A lot of people buy and sell. They think they're smart. Buying and selling, no, it's not smart. Investing is pretty boring. It's about being patient, riding out the storm. Invest your money, leave it there, let it grow. Don't worry about it. Don't buy and sell. This is not what investment is about. If you're a day trader, yeah, that's something else. If you do it professionally for a bank or a hedge fund, that's something else. But your personal retirement money, no, this is not something that you should be buying and selling all the time. Be patient, ride out the storm, and stick to your goals.
Thank you, Batya. And if I may just pick up a few points from what you've just said, we have another speaker also on day 3, Malika Polrashi. She dives into the deep details of investment, and she has 5 C's of investment, and one of the 5 C's is calm. And as you have mentioned, just being patient and not making knee-jerk reactions, reacting to, for example, the pandemic and selling in the current market. And I think the other thing that's kind of tied to that as well is, we live in a world now where a lot of people perhaps are looking to make a quick buck, and not perhaps seeing the difference between investment versus gambling. There's so much speculation out there, and I recall this article by Professor Scott Galloway, a renowned marketing professor from New York University in the States, where he predicts, he makes the claim that these mobile apps where people can do trading on things like commodities and so on will be the next big problem, especially with regards to the younger generations who are not very financial literate and may not have maybe the emotional intelligence skills required to use such a tool in its most efficient manner.
Yeah, you really need to be mindful of that. You need logic. You need maturity. You need to understand. You need to be patient. It's and really sticking to what your core values and goals are. And investing, that's not complicated. And they don't overcomplicate it. People sometimes overcomplicate it for themselves and cause themselves more stress. So that's why it's so important to get it right in the first place.
And if I may just add one small question to the advice that you have just given, is it ever wise to take out some of these savings that we have already planned to use for retirement and perhaps use them, reinvest them at an earlier stage?
At what stage now? In your early life or your retirement age, or?
Let's say at least 10 years prior to retirement.
Well, if your goals have changed, and a lot of people's goals do change, or a lot of people do need that income. So yes, I would look at that asset pool. I would never take it all out. And it's the same when you retire. You don't say, "Hey, I've retired. I'm taking all my money out." No, you only take out what you need. So yes, if you have started putting money away for retirement, your goals have changed. You have lost your job. You need that money. Yes, and of course you would draw down what you need. Not take all of it out, but your life doesn't stand still. Your life is always evolving. Your goals may always be moving and changing. So it's very important to evaluate that and make your money work for you.
Such sound advice, Batya. And I guess in summary of it all, for audience members, a lot of the questions that I have put forth in this interview are fairly generic. We try and cover a particular demographic as a whole. But as you can see from Batya's advice, a lot of it when it comes to preparing for retirement, at least from a financial aspect, is very personalized. And that is why the human touch is still important. Again, something that Batya mentioned earlier. And that is why, audience members should really seek out sound advice from people like Batya. I'm sure there are many other of your peers out there who help in terms of wealth management and certainly sound financial advice. So if we may conclude, Batya, I asked the same question to everyone whom I interview for this conference. How do you see yourself innovating? How do you see yourself provoking mindset change in the population within the next 12 months or so?
Interesting. I guess if you would have asked me this question in January, I probably would have given you a different answer. And I think the pandemic has had a real big mindset shift on people. So I'm a big fan of technology. So for me, I look at technology, I look at productivity, I look at innovation. And for me, one of the best things about technology is everything's now online. But investment paperwork, I don't print anymore. All my clients are signing up via DocuSign. Fantastic, far more efficient. You're saving the trees. So there's a lot more opportunity there in using technology as an enabler to do your job better. Look at technology for improved reporting, for improved data analytics. Looking at productivity, for me, one of my biggest productivity gain is not traveling to the office anymore. So I'm saving on travel time and saving on traveling to meet clients. So for me, always looking for that productivity mindset of how to do things better, smarter, quicker. But most importantly, I think in today's environment, in this virtual world, and as a wealth manager, for me, it's about building relationships. And the biggest shift is how you can build authentic and trusted relationships virtually. And I think that's what people have to become comfortable with. And that's what we have to be consistently working towards, because it's a different world now that we are living in.
Right. So thank you so much, Batya, for your time. It's been a wonderful session. I hope our participants at this Inspired conference have gained a lot in terms of strategies that they can put into action. Certainly, your 5 principles of sound investment towards retirement will be most helpful. And for our participants, please feel free to use our community app at the Headspace app, and also various other platforms below this video. You can submit your comments, submit your questions to Batya. She will offer her feedback. We'll publish those in our email newsletters after the conference has ended. And of course, for those of you who wish to contact Batya and maybe leverage upon her services, some information with regards to organization, St. James's Wealth Management, St. James's Place Wealth Management is provided beneath this video. Thank you again, Batya, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Nigel. Take care, everyone.